Hi there, this is Ian McTavish, founding mentor of Team 4152, Hoya Robotics in Huntsville, and this is a continuation of a series of tutorials on designing a gearbox. And so this is part 3. Parts 1 and 2 are in a separate video. Basically, we're going to start designing in Onshape now, but before we do, we just want to make sure that we have a document naming convention. This is really crucial because when we're working on a team, we need to understand how people name things and everything, and we're going to use a system. So I've got an example here. So first off is I always use 3 to 4 letters at the beginning that are identify what the project is. So anything I do myself is IBM. Anything that is for the team is 4152. Now the second 2 characters identify the project. So GB, Gearbox, makes sense to me. So that's what we're using. And again, for our team robot, it's always the year. So the official robot is, for last year was 19, next year's will be 20. The next thing is a single digit letter, A if it's an assembly, P if it's a part, and then there's a series of numbers. So the complete project is 0000. That's an assembly that contains everything, and then if I have sub-assemblies, they're numbered. If it's a part for a sub-assembly, I'll use the assembly number and then follow it by 2 numbers after that. So this system Team 254 uses, and that's where I got the idea. So next stage is creating a document in Onshape. In Onshape, it's really important that you check to make sure that you look at your account, and if you're dealing with an education account, that's a really crucial piece of this because you won't be able to share things properly. So if you haven't, First Robotics allows you to create an education account, and I can show you how to do it. We have created a new document, and in the document we've given it a name. I've named it IBM G2 because this is the second time I've created this particular tutorial. The other thing is that I'm just going to make sure that all my workspace units are done. Anytime you start a new document, make sure that the dimensions that you think you're working in are the actual dimensions. Now, in Onshape, there's a Part Studio automatically. I'm just going to quickly rename that using my naming convention. And this will be the first Part Studio, so P for part, and it's item 0 to begin with. And then I'm going to rename my assembly. So this is the assembly where everything will go. And I just realized I'm using my tutorial version, and I want to keep this separate so that I don't confuse myself. So there we go. I've got my assembly and part done. So I'm in the Part Studio now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the front plane, and I'm going to create a sketch. Always try to use the front plane. There's times where you want the top, and there's times where you'll use something else. So just having some method to your madness is really important. The other thing is you always want to be able to view normal to whatever plane it is. And if you hit the letter N on your keyboard, you can do the same thing, and it just makes it look so that you're looking head on. So I'm going to start off with the rectangle, and this rectangle I'm just using the origin as the center. In Onshape, you click once to set the starting point, and because this is a center point rectangle, the first starting point I clicked on the origin, I just move my mouse. Now I click a second time, and without moving my mouse or anything, I just start typing. So I'm going to type the number 6, hit enter, number 6, and now I've got a 6" by 6" rectangle. That's going to be the base of my gearbox. I'm also going to add a circle in the middle. And if you remember from the previous tutorial, so I click once in the origin, click once to set the outside, and then without moving my mouse, I just type the number 3 and hit enter. This is 3 inches, and that's the pitch diameter of my first driven gear. So I'm using that gear as my starting point for where everything is. And depending on your plan, you can do different starting points. I'm going to add another circle, and you want to be careful that things don't highlight orange when you're creating things. because you don't want to constrain items. So this circle is 0.6 inches, and so that's the diameter of my driving gear. So up here, I've got some different constraints. My driving gear my pinion has to be tangent to this circle, so that way the teeth will intersect and they will turn each other. So I'm setting tangent to force that circle to be attached. So my motor will have the gear on this, and I'm going to set this to be vertical. So I'm using the vertical tool, and now my gear is on top of the other one. I'm going to add another circle, and this time, instead of setting the size, I'm just going to simply set it to equals the other one. I'm also going to make it tangent, just like the other one. Whoops, I made a mistake there. I clicked coincident instead of tangent. So there's tangent, and mistakes happen if you're methodical. The moment you see red, you know you did something, undo it, figure out what you did wrong, and fix it right away. So now this is horizontal, so I've got my two gears here. That's great. Now, basically, that's going to be my first stage. The motor turns the pinion turns the driven gear. I'm going to add another gear that is actually physically on top of this gear, so it's going to share the same center. So I'm just going to click, and this is the 0.9 pitch diameter gear. So that's going to go there. And my final 60 tooth gear, I'm just going to click over to the side here, and it is 3 inches in diameter. Now, I am going to line it up so that it is vertical to the origin, and I'm going to set it so that it is tangent to that center. And that didn't work the way I wanted it. What I'm going to do basically this isn't working for me. So as I mentioned, fix it right away. I'm gonna start it so it is automatically horizontal to this. Now I should be able to make it tangent to that circle, and it will be underneath. So that's the way I want it. You'll notice that my gearbox, it's going outside of the gearbox. I can fix that by just resizing this. But for now, what I'm going to do is turn off all my tools. I'm going to select each of my circles. And what I'm doing is I'm going to select this construction tool so that all of these circles are construction lines. And the whole point with this is that I don't want to use these at all. What I want to do is use the geometry so that I can position things exactly where I want them. So I'm going to rename this and going to call it Gearbox Layout. And the check mark. That way my sketch is saved, it's easily available, and I'm good to go. That concludes this part. The next tutorial is going to be adding the holes, so that when we have the motor here, I need a hole for the pinion, I need holes that will mount the motor, and we'll be setting those things up at the next tutorial. Thank you for joining me.